In this video, I want to talk about the art of not trying hard. I've been thinking of like how I can talk about this, and it seems that there are many ways I can start. But I was gonna talk about usually my work experiences, how I'm the only man in the history of South Korea that has reported news in Korean and English. And in the course of doing so, I was defying science and how hard I worked. And in the end, I realized I came to this self-realization. But then let me actually start with this. I was just talking to a girl, and she was seeking an advice. She feels she's at her age 30, and she feels anxious. She's very she feels like in her company, in her job, she's like basically killing time because she's not really doing anything. She's not really learning anything. She's not being productive. And I told her my personal story, what I went through at her age. So to make this long story short, I came back to Korea after studying in the United States. I It was the time of 9/11, and the economy was really down. 2001. So as a foreign student, it was almost impossible to get a job. After applying to about 400, 500 positions all across the United States, I somehow was able to get a job at an immigration law firm. Yes, it was an immigration law firm, which means I was able to get a green card because that's what they did. And in fact, my predecessor, she was leaving, but she had earned green card. My plan was I was going to work. I was going to stay in America. There was no doubt about it. The only thing is, because of the Asian financial crisis in late 90s, my family just stopped sending me money, so I had to, make money for myself to continue to stay in the United States, and I was going to go to law school. That's why I studied hard. That's why I worked on English hard. Because I first learned English when I was like 17, and I worked hard to be fluent in it. Anyway, so I had to stick to this job at this law firm at Philadelphia. But then I ended up quitting it and coming back to Korea because when I worked there, I was paralegal, and one of the duties I had was making collection calls. And I learned from talking to all the Korean American clients that my boss, the representative lawyer back then, who was the owner of the law firm, apparently lied to all of these clients, Korean Americans. He himself was Korean American, so what he did was he would just move around back to state doing this, making money. He visited Korean church, sent out his business cards. He told these Korean Americans who couldn't speak English he would do a good job and he would not charge a big amount of money for a lawyering fee. But then he ended up not living up to his words. They all told me the same complaint. He lied. He, charged them a lot of money. And the reason why I studied hard and reason why I wanted to go to law school in the U.S. in the first place was because I wanted to work for Korean Americans, Asian American communities, because back then felt like they were underrepresented. So I wanted to do something for them to raise the awareness of the Asian Americans and all that, right? And so, like, when I was part of this law firm that was taking advantage of, this Asian immigrants, it was totally going against my value, you know, my value, the reason, the purpose of my work, my career. So I quit. I mean, I got this job after applying to 500 positions as an international student, and I came with Korea. I mean, I tried to actually start this venture business, but it didn't work out. It wasn't that easy. So I came back to Korea, and then my plan was I was going to make a lot of money very fast in Korea by teaching English, and my nose was bleeding because I was sleeping for like 4 hours a day, because my plan was I was going to make a lot of money, and maybe for a year or two, and then go to law school after earning that amount of money. But it was never easy, you know. The tuition for this law firm, the law school, was already, like, back then already 200 grand. And there was no way that I was able to make that amount of money in 1 or 2 years. So what ended up happening was, also in Korea, you can only apply for entry-level positions until age 29. So when you become 30 years old, your career, you're basically over. You're screwed. So I didn't have that much time. The clock was ticking. So what happened was, a friend of mine, he strongly suggested that, he said, like, I'm going to take it personally if you don't apply for this job. He suggested me to apply for this job as a news reporter at this satellite television news media outlet for the global audience. So it was English language television, like media. So I got the job. I became a news reporter there. But the thing is, I didn't really last long because I felt like, the boss and the colleagues, people that I was working for under, they also had that very different values. Most of them were females, and they wanted to get married to rich family because they were on TV. They spoke English on TV, and that was big deal, man. And I felt like that was bullshit, and I wanted to become a real journalist this time. So what I did was I quit my job, and I studied for this exam that was extremely competitive to work for Korean TV, Korean television. The ratio was like, one out of like 500, 600 applicants passed, to get a job. I was aiming for a producer position, entry level. The system is different in Korea. I know in America, like, you start from a local market and then you eventually move on to the big market, right? But in Korea, you have to start from the big market because you cannot go up, as your career progresses. You can only go down. So anyway, so I studied for it, and people that I asked for advice, everyone said, you're set because you speak English, you studied overseas. Because until that time, we were the ones. They recruited English speaking applicants before anyone else. So no doubt that I was gonna win this gamble. I was becoming 28, and by the time I was ready to take these tests after studying for it, after quitting that job at the English news media outlet, there was no doubt that I was going to make this, make it. But then later I realized that year was the first year they stopped taking applicants like myself who were educated overseas. Why? Because these people, right? The people who are Americanized, westernized, who studied in overseas in America, couldn't really fit into this Korean corporate environment. So what ended up happening was at 29, I had only one shot, one opportunity, right? Or more like three shots because there were three NBC, KBS, and SBS. There are three terrestrial like nationally televised media outlet network. I didn't make it to the second round in any one of those. So basically, I was jobless. I freelanced at this little hagwon, English teaching private academy that could barely pay me salary monthly on regularly. They would miss deadlines, and I was becoming old. I was 29, and because of this age limit in Korea, I thought my career was screwed. My life was all over because I cannot get a job after like 30, right? After I become 30 years old. But believe it or not, there was a time that I was studying for LSAT, which is the exam you have to take to go to law school in America, at this institute called Princeton Review. And this guy that I studied with, by the time I became 29, he became an American lawyer. So he called me one day. He was like, we're looking for English teacher in my law firm. So it was like December or something, right before I became 30 years old, that I got a job. I know that this job was more like specialist position, so I wasn't really following the regular track, you know. I wasn't really, because what people do is people get a job at entry level at like corporations like Samsung, LG, you know, and then they try to climb up the ladder, right, corporate ladder. But it was like a specialist position, but still, it was a miracle, you know, because also in Korea, I was applying to a bunch of places, like 600, right? I was counting actually. And I couldn't make any of those. And later I found out that was because on my resume, I looked like someone who would not last long. I went to school in America. I didn't go to military because I was sick, actually. I didn't talk about this, but yeah. So I was like such a stereotypical applicant who would be the first to quit. And also my first job experience didn't help me either because it was for like 6 months, right? I could not make it in any of these Korean companies either for entry level hiring. So it felt like a miracle when I was hired by this law firm a month before I became 30 years old. What ended up happening was that, well, I was an English teacher, so I was basically stationed at this room, and as any lawyer came in as being available, maybe they wanted to take a break or something from their work. They would come in and learn English from me, and I would offer them English lesson. The thing is, that was the case for partners, more like experienced lawyers, but then the associates, the baby lawyers, they couldn't really freely come into English class because they felt pressure from their boss. They couldn't just have freely just do whatever they wanted to do. They had assignment to work on. So I realized that at one point I was working, besides the fact that I was only teaching, hi, hello, how are you, fine, right? I'm fine. Which didn't really feel like a work. I also realized that Sometimes I worked less than like 4 hours, 5 hours a week. And I started panicking because I was 30 years old and I wasn't doing anything. I was just basically just sitting at my desk, and you know, I would do this really easy task, and I didn't even spend like that many hours doing that. So I felt like I was a very lazy person. I wasn't doing anything. I was just screwing around in my youth. I felt like I was wasting time. So when 6 months passed, one of my friends who was the producer for this media, the television network I worked at, the English speaking one, she called me. She was a producer, and she suggested I should go audition, because there's this big audition coming up. So I participated in it, and then the head of the radio department, she liked me, so I was hired as a news anchor on radio. And I finally felt like that was real work that I was finally going to do. While at a law firm, although this was full-time job, so I can write it down on my resume. But this freelancing gig, the work was very valuable because it was obvious what I was doing. It was very clear. The only problem was it was freelancing. So for future career, a lot of companies do not consider freelancing experiences like real experiences. So I had to gamble. But then, I ended up taking the offer. And then at that place, I lasted for 1.5 years. And after the 1.5 years, I was told to leave because they were concerned about my age. What? Now? They already knew how old I was, right? They were saying, well, you're becoming old, you should work for this regular job. They were telling me these stories of my predecessors. And later I found out what happened was somebody with connections took my position. And they were just giving me this BS excuse because they couldn't just fire me. They couldn't just let me go. They had to just blame it on something, which was my age. So what ended up was happening was I was jobless. I found myself jobless again. I was like 34, 33, and I had like barely, 2 6 months long experiences, full-time position, and all freelancing. Like for what, 1.5 years? So I didn't know what to do with my career. I was really screwed. I felt like I just, once again, man, I don't know what I'm going to do with my career now. That's how I felt. Meantime, remember that law firm? The guy, my friend, who was the lawyer there, who was the one who made the phone call to me, a few years later, he told me that around the time I was leaving the position at the law firm, there was talk going on in the management. The management people were saying maybe they were talking about sending me to law school, and they would make me some kind of like mascot, kind of like, they would train me. I could be there like like kind of mascot lawyer for the law firm. So my friend was saying, well, you just basically let go of this golden opportunity because you couldn't stand, you couldn't just stay put. I mean, I don't know. Was it a good decision that I left? Should I just been sticking around? I left the place because I felt like I was just killing time. But apparently, I was not. Had I waited little longer, had I just kind of, you know, sit there and maybe just, I don't know. I was even looking for ways to become AICPA, which is American Accountant. I was like going to take these courses because I just had like little work. I felt like I was literally wasting time. But apparently, just being present at the desk, at my job, at the work, at the office, I was doing something. That was what I was doing. It was nothing invaluable. That's part of the work experiences as well. That's part of doing something. Not doing anything is also part of doing something. I mean, sure, I was doing something. I was teaching this really basic English, basic level English to lawyers. I mean, looking back, I could have still kind of looked for what, the needs of the lawyers, and maybe I could just find some opportunities. Maybe, I could work on the network. I could just network with all the lawyers. Maybe there were things that I could have done. But I was just so anxious. I was so concerned that I was just wasting time, doing nothing. I didn't get any work. So I was talking to this friend early on, as I said. And I shared this story. And I told her, you're not really doing anything. You're not really doing nothing just because you're not doing anything really productive. Sometimes not really doing anything, just hanging in there. Just being present. Doing the bare minimum is part of work experiences. Because that's learning to be part of the system. And being part of the system is something very, very, very critical if you want to have a corporate experience. Because you know what? I don't know about your country, whoever is watching this, but in my country, you could have all these great credentials, licenses, but if you cannot show, you cannot prove that you cannot work in a single position for more than like 5 years or even like 3 years, they're not gonna hire you because they think that you're hard to work with. And this is very important, being part of the system, right? I mean, this video is not going to be about this, being part of the system. Actually, it's more about the opposite, because I'm more like a non-conformist, right? I don't believe in conforming to the norm. I think being independent is the way to go these days, especially these days, because we live in the era of uncertainties, and it's very easy to feel like you have to follow the mob, the mass, the public, right? You have to follow the common way. No, for me, one of the greatest things that I've done in my life is not conforming to the common value, the popular ideas. And that's why I am a lot more secure than most people in my age, career-wise. Because I went my way. I acquired my skill set. Right? So, I know I just talked about this story where my message was do not worry so much about not being particularly productive, right? Or visibly productive. Sometimes you can just chill and not really doing anything, and that's still doing something, right? And all of a sudden I'm talking about this. But this is something that I was going to talk about. This is what's going to be my main thing, right, of this video. So I was going to talk about my private experience, personal experiences to private life. But then, you know what? That's going to take up too much time, and like this, the theme of this video, I don't want it to try too hard. So let me tell you this. So like I said, like earlier, in the beginning of this video, I'm the only Korean man ever in history that has reported news in Korean and English. And I had to work really hard because I had to defy science. The science says that after a certain age, you cannot be fluent in our language enough to do this kind of work, right? At least. But I did. I proved that it was wrong. You know why? Because I had this strong motivation. Very strong motivation. I remember I left a law firm in the United States, the immigration law firm. I could have stayed there and just earned green card, but I gave it up because I had my values. Because of these values, I had the energy. And because I had this energy, I was so passionate. And because of this passion, I worked hard, and I established my credentials. But at one point, I had a problem. The problem was, in the real world, there was no position that was in need of people like myself. CNN is not interested in recruiting somebody who can do the job at the same time, two jobs at the same time. None of this media, the major news media, mainstream news media outlets are looking or in need of this skill set. No. This is something like, this is just someone's, this is a great record. It looks good, but what can you do with it? So for the amount of time, energy that I spent to making this achievement, I was not getting any reward. While I was looking at my friends. I didn't compare myself. I don't really care about other people. They have their lives. But for this just little area, right? I was looking at my friends. A lot of my friends, I realized, they didn't really work. They worked hard, but not as much as I did. Not as hard as I did. I suffered from panic attack for 10 years because I was always very worried, and I was concerned too much, and I was always worried about the future, and I was working hard. But these friends, they were on a lot easier ride. They still worked hard, but not to the point I was driving myself nuts. And they were rewarded too, as they deserved, from working hard, meeting the deadlines, doing things they are responsible for. While my reward would never come. So at one point, I opened an English institute, to teach English, because I felt like my credentials, my resume, is convincing enough to people who wanted to learn English. You know what happened? Most people could not tell the difference between me and anyone who studied abroad, who still spoke English, or even anyone who's from the United States had blonde hair, blue eyes. They even prefer those. While because I started from the rock bottom and made this achievement, I had so much more to offer as a teacher. And these people they were already given this language skill from birth. But they were a lot of times valued even more highly. And I know some of you say, well, couldn't you also convince the client? No. This thing called perception. The perception in the market, in business. The perception your clients have in your market do not change unless you are like Steve Jobs, or you're the king, like everyone admires you, You don't so since I didn't have the authority, I was not able to convince the clients. When I said this, they didn't take it the way it is. They thought I was just, oh, this guy is, maybe he's not really doing well in his business. That's why he has to give this extra explanation. So this is something I learned. I mean, yeah, there were some people that were already good English speakers. They knew what I was able to offer, but the problem was there were just so few of them. This whole general market, the big market, right? 99% of the clients, they didn't have this ability to distinguish myself from others. And even those people who knew my value, they would not last long. Well, partly because they got what they wanted very short period of time, or let me put it this way: people do not come to your service just because they wanted your service. They always want something else. Do I sound too complicated? So people who are interested in learning English, you would think that if you just teach them English really well, they'll actually appreciate it, and they'll just keep coming to you, and they'll talk about you, and they might introduce you to their friends or something. No, that's not exactly necessarily what they want. They want to convince themselves that they were doing something productive. That's one thing. Secondly, they also kind of want to meet people too, like other students. That's also important too. And thirdly, they want to have good time. This like hobby. People learn English, foreign language for hobby, unless they were studying for TOEFL or some kind of exam, GRE, right? The people who are just learning general English classes. It's hobby, right? So just because you're just doing the main, your strength lies in the main area like of learning English or teaching English, doesn't mean you'll be appreciated as much as you should be, because these other things also matter to your clients. As it's valuable things. But because I was just always passionate, I was so focused on what I was doing, I missed out other things. I was just focused on teaching English and what I was doing and improving my students' English. What ends up happening is your clients start leaving because you're not really fulfilling their needs. Back then, I didn't understand because I wasn't able to see these things. I was just focused on my work. But people want more things than just that particular work. I was going to talk about other things, but I think I'm going to just start wrapping up here. So what does this have to do with not trying too hard? At one point, I realized that because I was so passionate and I was always concerned with what was the right thing to do at work, I realized that I was trying too hard, and because of the fact that I was trying too hard, I was missing out what mattered the most, which is what I was just talking about a minute ago, what my clients truly wanted. But back then I was just, I was so like righteous, and nobody was able to argue against me because they knew I was right too. They knew that the role of English teacher and the reason why they come to me is because to learn English. This was English education. But then there are things that people just rather just not say or even rather not admit. That is, well, like making friends with people and also having good time. And they prefer someone, teacher who's more entertaining, more amusing, right? If that teacher is not so much worse than me, right? Or people like me. So because of this, I was not able to, again, earn what I wanted to earn because I was trying too hard. I missed out perhaps the most valuable things because I was just too passionate. So this video is now about you have to give up. Life is just nothing. Just give up, have fun, don't work. No, it's not about that. It's about you want to step back and you realize, you'll be surprised to know that a lot of times you end up getting things that you didn't expect to get because you didn't try too hard. Like, for example, being able to fall asleep. If you have insomnia, if you cannot fall asleep, do you try really hard to fall asleep? No. If you try really hard to fall asleep, you're not going to succeed. These things, there are some things, more than some things. I think there are a lot of things in life that you just kind of have to let happen. You cannot really force. You cannot really try so hard. Another thing is that people skill. Well, I don't want to say people skill, but what your clients want, what your boss wants, what your girlfriend wants, what your boyfriend wants, what people want. If you try too hard, if you're too focused on your own agenda, your own purpose, goal, you miss out what they truly want. Instead, you'll just keep giving them what they really don't want, and because you believe this is what they need. But a lot of times you may be wrong. A lot of times you are giving them misery. Let's combine these two stories into one. Remember the story that I was telling my friend early on, and my work experiences. 4 years ago, I quit drinking. I quit drinking caffeine too. I spent that year, the entire year, by myself at my house. I didn't even talk to my family, and it was the most healing time ever. And for the first time, I started engaging in very unproductive things. Until that time, even when I was drinking alcohol, like I would not sit down because I wanted to be productive even when I was partying. I wanted to be doing something valuable even when I was getting trashed. So I thought if I don't sit down, if I either walk around or stand when I was drinking, still valuable. But but instead of doing so, what I did was I quit drinking alcohol. I was just trying hard, so I was being functioning alcoholic. You know what functioning alcoholic is? That's exactly what functioning alcoholic is. You're an alcoholic, but you're somehow managing to being productive, and you're not like one of those people on the street, right? You're still doing pretty well, at work. Yeah, like making sure you're still burning calories while drinking. That's functioning alcoholism. So that year, I learned that doing the most unnecessary, sometimes time wasting, silly stuff is so crucial, because your brain needs a break too. To be creative, a lot of times, you keep seeking for answer, but you cannot find the answer. Then take a freaking break. Just take a step back. Do something totally different, unproductive even. If you want to be productive, try being unproductive. Then you'll see. You'll be able to be more productive, be more effective, efficient. You need that. You need that balance. So yeah. But I thought I have no script, so I'm sure there are stuff that I'm missing, but I'll either write it on the comment section if there's something that I realize I missed, or I might just make more videos. But yeah, so this is my new thing. I think I'm gonna make videos under the theme of not trying too hard. Yeah, I think it was Lao Tzu or Chuang-Tzu, the Chinese philosophers. Either one of them talked about how in wild nature, this little bug was so focused on his prey, while not his, because it's right, like the bugs, I don't know the bug's gender. The bug's predator was so focused on hunting the bug. And the bug's predator's predator was so focused on, because they were so focused on their prey, they didn't notice that their predator was staring at them, right? So by being so obsessed and so trying too hard, you miss out what matters more. What matters more? Losing your life? Dying? Between dying and having a meal? Of course, dying matters more, right? When you slow down, you go further. When you try to do less, you achieve more. So these days, I'm just learning to just relax and try to minimize work or spending energy. It's a new lifestyle. But hey, it works. I think I figured it out. I think I figured out why in my 20s and 30s I tried so hard. I worked so hard, but I was never able to achieve anything. At least I wasn't getting rewarded. Instead, I was just getting poorer and poorer and poorer, and I was only taking up only difficult assignments, while those lucrative products, profitable products, were taken by someone else who had better connections, better ties, while I felt like I was the only one, I was the right one, I had the right skill set, but you know what, that's not what people want, right? That's not what society wants necessarily. So you need to chillax, relax, chill the hell out. Enjoy the life. Why? If you just, let's say, even if you become successful, if you're miserable all the time, you're angry all the time. Yeah, that's something that also happened to me. That was a huge sign of burnout. At one point, I realized I was just easily angry all the time. I was angry. One little stress could make me angry. And that's a sign of anger. Burnout. If you cannot enjoy the ride, it doesn't matter how much successful you turn out, right? Your whole journey was miserable or stressful and frustrating, and so enjoy the ride. What's the purpose of working hard, living hard, fighting temptations, and doing all those? Okay, well, thanks for watching this long video. If you like this video, please subscribe, like this video, leave a nice comment. If you come back, you will not regret it. I'm gonna probably make some crazy content, maybe. I don't know. Who knows what's gonna happen? But yeah, subscribe. Thanks for watching.